Hey everyone! In week 8, we'll be talking more about CSS modules and routing in React and how it all ties together in the grand scheme of routing. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing that we're going to talk about is the React router. So what exactly is React router? React router helps us navigate between different pages, screens, and components in a React app. However, the React router is not exactly native to React. So what do we exactly mean when we say that it's not native to React? It means that it's not part of the original dependencies of when you create a React app, and needs to be installed as a part of an external package called the React Router DOM. So the way you do that is you run the command script npm install React Router DOM at 5.2.0 flag save. The 5.2.0 is just an arbitrary version number, and that might change depending on the latest updates. But yeah, that's the gist of how you import the React Router DOM. So again, it's used for navigating between different components in your React app and helps change the browser URL. So if you take a look at an example at the bottom, we use import to first import the useNavigate hook from the React Router DOM. The useNavigate hook basically helps you dynamically navigate between different pages and components. We'll talk more about how it's exactly used and why we use that in class on Tuesday. But for now, just to give you a high-level overview, here we have a component called component. Within that, we have a constant called navigate, to which we have initialized the useNavigate hook. So the next thing that is part of the React Router DOM package is the browser router. What it does is basically it indicates that everything that is wrapped around this is going to have a routing component associated with it. It just basically enables routing services for all things that are wrapped around it. What it does is it enables React Router to work. We'll talk more about that again in class when we talk about how it all ties in together in the bigger picture. Okay, so the next thing is called route, which is again a part of the React Router DOM package. It helps you basically create specific paths that can lead to separate components or separate pages within your React app. It takes in two things. It could technically take more, but for our sake, we can just consider path and exact. Path is an argument that specifies the web link you should visit to see that component or HTML code that is within that. An exact attribute says that the path needs to be an exact match in order to show this component or HTML. So if you take a look at the bottom, we again have imported route from React Router DOM, and then we have the app component. Within that, we have two separate routes that we have specified. So if you take a look at the first one, the path for rendering the component user is /user, and the path for rendering component user profile is /profile. The difference between the two is that in the second routing component, we have added the keyword exact. In the next slide, we'll talk more about what exact exactly is. Okay, so as we discussed before, there's a difference between using exact for a routing component and not using exact. So in the first one, if you take a look at the first bullet point, it talks about how if you have three different URLs, localhost 3000/user, localhost 3000/user/auth, and /user/super/long/URL, right? So every time that /user is a prefix for any URL, that URL is going to get rendered, meaning all three URLs from the first bullet point match with /URL, /user, and as a result, the user component is going to get rendered. However, for the second route, user profile explicitly mentions that for user profile, it is explicitly mentioned that for only the exact path of /profile will that component be rendered, meaning that only and only when you have the URL localhost 3000 /profile will user profile be rendered. So let's say if you have a URL which is something like localhost 3000 /profile /person or something like that. In that case, the user profile component would not get rendered. It's a little confusing, but we'll clarify more in class and hopefully add an exercise relating to it just to make it a little bit more clear. But I hope it makes sense for now. Okay, so here's an example of how it ties in together. So we have imported browser router, route, and routes from the React router package, and we have two components, home and about. We have declared our app function. Within that, like we mentioned before, that anything that is going to have routing associated with it would be wrapped within the browser router components. Now, within that, we didn't mention that before, but it would be a good idea to probably mention it now, that each of these routes are encased or wrapped within another component, which is called routes. What it basically does is it's just a collection of all the routes which are going to be within your app, and the route component by itself does not work without the routes parent component. It's a little confusing and it doesn't make sense, but for now, just remember the hierarchy, that it's browser router, which has routes component within it, and the routes component is the collection of all different routes that you can specify for your app, and it can have multiple routes associated with it. And yes, that's all we're going to talk about in today's pre-work, and hopefully it kind of makes sense, but even if it doesn't, we'll cover it more in class and have many exercises relating to it. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your week.